gonna have a fish. Oh, Tyler. All right. Recording? Yep. All right, let's get going. So today we are going to talk about technology and art and how that translates into architecture and photography. There was not enough information in the lessons about the post-industrial stuff, and there's some cool stuff in there. So that's what we're going to look at today. And to start with, that means you guys have work to do. And since there's only 3 of you, I will take one of them. So architecture. In the post-industrial era, they have steel. Steel gets refined and the process gets made and it makes millions of dollars for everybody, and it allows for us to build the railroads and to build skyscrapers because steel can hold up buildings much better than iron construction or brick alone. And so using steel construction means they can start to build crazy cool things. This is where we see the layout for having skyscrapers, which once we've got steel, we need to have elevators to get people up that high. So architecture goes crazy because we've got this new ability to build stuff. And the highlights of what we see is every couple of years, somewhere around the world hosts a world exhibition or a World's Fair. And it still happens today, but it's not as cool as it was back in the 1900s. And we're going to look at London, Philadelphia, Paris, and Chicago and find some examples. So I'll put it in the chat here, but we need to go to this Padlet link. And then what we'll do is find stuff to start posting there. I already started filling one out. Let me put the link in the chat so you don't have to type it in. Annoying to copy. Okay. Okay, everybody go here. Okay. Once you're there, you can see that I already started it with one post about the Chicago's World Fair. But there's also a World's Fair at London. So let's have you do that one, Alejandro. And so it's London in 1851. And you can search right in the Padlet. Let me show you. Okay, can you guys see? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so if you go to create a Padlet, like here, and you can click on the photo, you don't want to take a picture, you want to Google search. And then you can search for the World's Fair, you can search for buildings, and it'll find any of the images, and then you can post them. And then you need to put a little bit of a summary. So I did a little bit here about the Chicago World's Fair. That's where they built the Ferris wheel. So we want to find out about the other ones. So that means that Carter, you are going to get Chicago 1893. And then Tyler, no, you don't get Chicago, Carter. I get Chicago because I already started it. Carter, you get Paris, which is much cooler. 1889. And Tyler, Philadelphia. (1876). Okay, so we're going to take a few minutes, exactly like that. Find different images of anything that was built for your World's Fair, because we're looking at the architecture. So to do that search again, click on the little plus sign, and then you can use the Google right there and search it out, and then click through it and find it and post it. Okay. Good start, guys. See. And I got us some fair background music for this research. See if it works. You guys hear the fair music? Is that working? Cool. Okay. Okay, you can do more than one post. Let's make, I think I said on the instructions to do what? 3. So 3 interesting facts, okay? This is a good start. You guys are doing awesome. Cool. Put them in order. Let's get some more facts up here. Once you are doing the Google search, if you need more information, you can always just open a tab in Chrome and look. Okay, I put them in chronological order for us. Let's do a couple more minutes, guys. Let's get at least another fact up there for each person. All right, let's talk about these things. So, sorry, I was looking for more detail. You can see me doing it. So the World's Fair in 1851, the first one, that's the one that you did, Alejandro. It's really good. The Crystal Palace was a breakthrough in architecture. So it was basically a greenhouse. It had iron structures and then glass everywhere, hence the name, the Crystal Palace. And like you said, it didn't last long. They tore it down after the exhibition and they rebuilt it in a park. And it was there through the 1930s, and then they took it down again. And where I live in San Diego, we actually have sort of a World's Fair. They had the World's Fair in San Francisco in 1915, and San Diego was like, no, we wanted it. So San Diego had their big fair anyways, and they built Balboa Park, and there's all these museums there, and they built a replica of the Crystal Palace. And so I've been to that one, and it's pretty cool because it's just like, it looks like a skeleton because it's just all of these iron frames everywhere, and then it's glass, like you can see through the whole thing. And so using it at the World's exhibition was really, really cool because no one had ever been inside of a building on that scale that was that big. So that's awesome. The Eiffel Tower is the only building from this list that is still standing. It's still there, obviously. It was built for the World's Fair. It was supposed to be the tallest thing in the world. Built entirely out of iron and steel construction. And then the guy who built the Eiffel Tower, they wanted him to come to Chicago and build something as cool. But then the guy in charge of the Chicago Fair was like, okay, we want it as tall as the Eiffel Tower, but we want it to move. We want people to ride on it or do something. And so they came up with the idea of building the Ferris wheel. And so the first Ferris wheel ever was built for the Chicago exhibition, and it was gigantic. I mean, it was pretty big for a Ferris wheel, but it was towered over everything else. The rest of the fair in Chicago was built of like 2x4s, and they just covered it with plaster. It wasn't meant to last for very long. And when the fair was over, they just like abandoned the area where it was in because there's nothing happening. And then about 3 years later, the whole thing caught fire and just like tore through, and it burned down in like 12 hours. And there was nothing the fire department could do because it's just old 2x4s and plaster. Like there was nothing to save. The Ferris wheel they built for the fair got taken down. And then Philadelphia, so good summary that you did on that one, Tyler. But you missed one of the most important cool things about it is that they built a giant steam engine, and it powered the whole fair. Like all of the buildings, anything that ran on any kind of mechanization ran off of this one huge steam engine. So instead of like the Eiffel Tower or the Ferris wheel or the Glass Palace, Philadelphia had this huge engine that just powered everything. So there's a little bit about the architecture. Thanks for doing some quick research, guys, and filling that in. I appreciate it. Anything that you want to share that you found about your stuff, or any questions? And you know, you guys can use the chat or the mic or just, you know, the heads. I like the bobbleheads. No questions? Okay, cool. Let's go back to look at this then. Art Nouveau. Art Nouveau is so cool, and it only got like one page in the lesson, and it ticked me off, so we're going to talk about it some more. So it was this idea of nature and elegance and fun, and it was definitely a reaction to some of the postmodern stuff. Like instead of, it was taking those giant steel beams and making it something cool and making it livable and making it fun. So there's this quote: "There are no straight lines or sharp corners in nature. Therefore, buildings must have no straight lines or sharp corners." What are the problems if you build a building that doesn't have any straight lines? Can you even do that? Can you build a building? Yeah, Alejandro, you'd have to be really creative. If you're going to build something with no straight lines, you have to have some other way of doing it, some other agenda. And so Art Nouveau was, one thing that helped it stand out was this idea that there weren't straight lines. You can see all of the curves and folds here. And then there was this emphasis on nature, on natural elements. Yeah, Tyler, it takes more of a process. You really have to think about it and to plan it and to work it out. Okay, let's get Carter back in here. Okay, welcome back, Carter. So in order to do that, it takes more time, more lines. Things in nature occur organically and don't have straight lines and survive, but that's because they evolve over time. And in order to build it that way, you have to really plan and work through it. And the really good example of that is this guy, Antonio Gaudí, and he is from Spain, and he built buildings. He was an architect. He wasn't a painter or a sculptor. He was an architect, but he was crazy pants, guys. He built buildings without any straight lines. Like, his buildings waved and curved. His big building that we're going to look at in this quick video was called La Pedrera, which means the quarry, because it looks, and they'll tell you a little bit too, and so I'm kind of answering number 2, but it looks as if it was worn away or eroded. Like, it's smooth, like, you know, if you find a stone that's been in the ocean or a river and it's like really, really smooth and maybe it has a hole or a pocket on it and the water and the sand have worn it away. That's what his buildings were like. So the picture on my screen today is inside his one building called the Casa Mila. This is inside of the building. Like, the roof slopes everywhere. There's light all over the place. The floor is uneven. Like, he just was crazy about it. So I want to show you just a little part of this video, because they're going to talk about how the structure, like, how was he able to do that? I'm going to get rid of this, make this big. No, there we go. Okay, so how is he able to build this is the question. I'm just going to watch a little piece.
Spanish garrisons. On one side of these wide, straight avenues, going right through the city from the center to its outer limits, Gaudí, breaking all the rules in force, set a wall on a soft slant instead of an angle.
Okay, that's making me mad. Let me pull it up here.
While the original vision was an egalitarian one, where each zone was to outdo each other.
Sorry, guys. Let me pull it up somewhere else.
And for the Milas found that it through the city from the center.
Okay, here we go. Okay, got it. Sorry for pausing.
To its outer limits, Gaudí, breaking all the rules in force, set a wall on a soft slant instead of an angle. With this facade, he pushed the destructuration of an architecture based on line and right angle to its very limit. Gaudí, with his passion for anatomy, thought of his building as a body covered with a skin.
Oh, no.
The columns were to be the building's skeleton, the stone its flesh.
I totally had it playing, and it wasn't playing for you guys. Let me switch. Sorry. Here we go. You can see it now, full screen paused. Okay.
to its outer limits,
Hear it?
Gaudi, breaking all the rules in force, set a wall on a soft slant instead of an angle. With this facade, he pushed the destructuration of an architecture based on line and right angle to its very limit. Gaudi, with his passion for anatomy, thought of his building as a body covered with a skin. The columns were to be the building's skeleton, the stone its flesh. The columns, dressed in stone, rise up 6 stories to the attics. These columns bear the weight of the building. This facade is not a load-bearing wall, but just a curtain wall inserted between the metallic elements that project from the main girders. There was nothing more to do than to fill up the spaces between the columns. Gaudi could add or subtract the blocks of stone as he liked, creating huge windows, 150 in all, and immense balconies. The facade could be adjusted at will. It could be sculpted, twisted, made to ripple in a continuous movement that gives the impression that the whole mass rides along in its own undulating rhythm. The facade of the Casa Mila became a piece of sculpture.
Okay, let's stop it there. So, what technology allowed him to be able to build that? Yeah, the new use of steel. Having steel construction meant that he didn't need like the bricks to stand on top of each other to keep the building up. What he did on the facade was just for the appearance. And so it's able to have those like bends and flows and so many windows and arches because it's just like the steel construction. Exactly right, Carter. That strong steel structures, having that inside meant he could do whatever he wanted. So the same technology that allowed for the Eiffel Tower allowed for buildings like this. What influenced his design? Why have it flow and curve like that? What was he inspired by? Yeah, exactly. He talked about how he viewed the building like anatomy, that steel structures like a bone, and then the facade was the skin, and it could be shaped however he wanted. Like a river, Tyler, he talked about how it was flowing. No worries, Art Nouveau is not an easy word to spell, but he was inspired by that influence on nature and the curves. The other name for the building, the Casa Mila, is La Perrera, which means the quarry. So the idea that it's been eroded and worn out, that he was really, really inspired by nature. And like I said, he was an architect. He worked in Barcelona and he built a lot of buildings. This is one of them. The one that is most famous and most just straight up crazy pants is actually a cathedral called the Sagrada Familia. And again, inspired by nature and Art Nouveau, you can see like the strong geometric shapes in the background of the different facades, but then look at those columns up front and how like they are twisted and they bend, and all over the walls of this cathedral. Well, let me ask you, what would you expect to see on the walls of a cathedral? Like what would you assume would be there? Yeah, holy figures, saints, scenes from the Bible, that kind of thing. And there are those. I mean, there are some saints, there are like portions from Jesus's life on the walls, but there's also jellyfish and butterflies and honeycomb and seaweed and mathematical equations. Definitely there are some pigeons out there, but he kept some of those traditional, Gaudi was very religious. Like, he wanted to build a cathedral. He's super, super Catholic. So he wanted to have what needs to be there with the faith, but then he was inspired by nature so much that there's like seaweed waves coming up the wall, and he thought that math was part of nature. So there's one glass door that just has math equations all over it. Like, it's crazy. And then the inside, look at that picture on the right. Is that what the inside of a church normally looks like? What's different about it? Yeah, the colors. It is so colorful. And if you look up high and you can see those columns and like the shapes on the top, it's supposed to be like a rainforest canopy inside there, with the columns as the trees, and then the shapes inside, and then the colors. There's the stained glass, obviously, but then there's pieces of just primary colors in glass up high to catch the light. So in the daytime, it's like this, just primary colors and bright. And there's one thing in the picture on the left from the outside that's there. It's a 100-year-old building, so you maybe wouldn't expect to see this. There's scaffolding. Cathedral's not done. They're still working on it. And it's such a crazy design that even though it's sanctioned by the Catholic Church as an actual cathedral, the Catholic Church isn't paying for it. They're not building it. So it's all being built by private donations and people that like believe in Gaudi's vision. And they've been building it for 100 years. I mean, it's been in construction already for 100 years. It's got a projected construction date in the future. They're still working on it. When it's done, it will be the tallest church. It will be taller than St. Peter's in the Vatican, which is right now the tallest church. But that top spire, so you can see if you look like in the picture, there's the apex over the front, and then the columns, and then there's the scaffolding you can see behind it. That's where that center spire is going to be, and it's going to be like twice as tall as everything that's already there. It's kind of crazy. But this is that combination of Art Nouveau, of nature, of elements, of that like elegant, twisty vision, and then architecture and how science make that possible. You know what else science makes possible in the post-industrial world? Stained glass, which we see here in the cathedral. But how does the change in stained glass connect with the post-industrial and the age of realism from what it was like before? How is stained glass of this era different than stained glass earlier? Thanks, Alejandro. Yeah, it is. It's more intricate, and they're able to like mass produce it, not entirely, but they can make a lot more of it. It tells a story, it's intricate, and it's not just for religious purposes. They're able to have it for other things, for lamps, for things like that. Okay. And then we also, so how did changes in technology affect art? Do you guys have, you can put it in the chat, or if you want to try annotating, you should be able to grab the marker and write on this screen. Does that work for you? No? Let me see. Okay. On the black toolbar, do you guys have the little marker that says annotate? No? Oh, I just enabled it. Let me try one more time, and if not, then we'll just do it in the chat. Okay. Do you see it there now? Where there's like mute and video, and there should be a little marker and it says annotate, and if you click on it, it brings up a toolbar. Nope. All right, you get nothing. You have to tell me in the chat or on mic then, how did changes in technology affect art? Oh, that's a good point, Alejandro. Easier to preserve, easier to keep. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, but that's true. Like, we have so much more from that era because it was easier to keep, and that era was where we start to see actions in improving stuff. Yeah. Okay, that's a good point too, Tyler. The resources that are available. This is also just right after where we see artists switching from using having to grind their own paint to being able to like take their paint places, having paint tubes available, which I know that's like a little thing, but being able to take paint already mixed meant that artists could paint outside. And that's how we're going to see guys in the next unit like Manet and Monet, and also how they're able to make paintings have more depth and more dimension because they're using different colors and more things are available. Good. What else? How else does technology change art? Okay. Oh, Carter, that was good. New creative ways to make different kinds of art, new resources, new things, sharing of platforms, process of creating. Good. Okay, you guys, those are great. Those are good examples. There's more resources, there's more availability, there's easier preservation. You can be more creative when you have more stuff. Photography comes in and is a kind of art, which photography didn't really exist before the 1820s. The process was really slow of getting the technology up. By the time we get to the 1860s, it's pretty functional. And so the most famous American photographer of this era was a guy named Matthew Brady. And he took photographs of Civil War scenes, but after the war, a lot of people started to question whether or not he actually did them or if he would pose the figures and take them. So there's kind of a controversy about him, about how authentic his things are as a documentary. But how did technology allow him to expand his art? Yeah, thanks, Tyler. That's awesome. Because he's able to take his camera with him, because he can capture these really realistic things, make it quicker, not having to paint the scene. And quicker is a good point, because even with photography, before him, like 10 years before, to take the photographs, you had to expose the plate or the film to light for like 10 minutes. So you couldn't capture things with people. It's really hard to take photographs of people because they had to sit still for 10 minutes. And you guys know how terrible that is. So it allowed him to do it quicker, do it faster, do it better, some people would argue. Yeah, he was able to capture the realities of war. And the Civil War is considered one of the first modern wars because it uses things like machine guns. It uses not automatic, but reloadable materials. That it really is on the edge. And then having it with photography means that we can see it. People can see the war, can talk about it. Matthew Brady met with Lincoln, who applauded his work, thought what he was doing was good. Is there anything that impresses you or surprises you about these documentary photos? They do all have beards. Yeah, the quality's really good, right? It's really crisp. Yeah, definitely. The bottom one is a pose. So as Brady would travel, sometimes he would take scenes of the battlefield, and then sometimes he would take poses of the men. And warfare, on battle days, you're 100% in danger, going to kill and murder people. But the rest of the time, you're camping, you're marching, you're waiting. And so he would go into the camps and get men from different units or men from the same towns to pose together. So that's a good one. And then that one on the top right, I should explain, that's not Brady. That's General Custer from the American West. So in addition to doing these documentary photos, Brady also spent a lot of time doing portrait photos, and he became pretty famous. I mean, as famous as like Sargent for painting rich people, Brady was famous for photographing the Americans of the era. And then there's Jacob Riis. And I actually learned about him when I was doing my undergrad in history, because he would take these photographs of people in slums and in harsh living conditions, and he would just like go into where they were camping and take the photo. So it's not staged at all. But how did changes in technology allow for him to take these kind of photos? Yeah, it definitely spread awareness. He published all of his books together, all of his photos together in a book called How the Other Half Lives. And it brought attention to the poverty and like the harsh situations in New York and in Chicago in the late 1890s. So his work definitely impacted the progressive era and some of the reforms that we associate with that. Yeah, the exact facial expressions of people, and the pictures were really real. Yeah, he wanted to create social change. He was part of that movement. And one thing that you might not consider about the technology that he had, but that he used, was a flash. He was the first one to use really flash photography. So he would go into like this photo, into this room where these people are sleeping, and flash and take the picture and be able to capture them from this dark room in an instant. And so he had all of these photographs. In some ways, it was kind of invasive, because he would go into boarding houses and slums and just take pictures of people at night while they were asleep, which is a little bit creepy. But he was using them to gather, to collect this idea of social change and show this is what's happening, that the world isn't just photographs of General Custer. Photographs can be used to show how real people are living and what it's like and some of the problems that are with it. And then one more, and that is this guy, Felix Nadar. And he's really famous for taking portraits and like portraits of rich people and famous people, but he got really into aerial photography. So how would technology allow for him to expand his art? Yeah, the evolution of flight for sure. People like the Wright brothers were working on flying in planes. You can see Nadar, he used a hot air balloon. That was his primary means of getting up there, so he could take these kind of aerial photographs. The photograph of the city, the bottom left one, is of Boston, and he called it As the Bird and the Pigeon See It. And it was views that people had never been able to see like that, just like you said, Carter. Pictures that people had never seen before. They never looked at it that way. So it was really, really different. He even tried putting tiny cameras on birds. You can see that with his pigeon, and sending them up and then seeing if they could bring it down. It wasn't super successful because the birds weren't great at focusing and like staying consistently, but he would get all of these photos and then he would kind of doctor them together to create his image. So with stuff like this, it would be easier to paint it knowing what it would look like, but getting these photographs, it was showing people something that they'd never been seen before. So it was really a whole new kind of art. And that is what I wanted us to look at and talk about today. What do you think? How will technology continue to change art? What's art going to look like in the future? We're getting more and more new ideas all the time. What do you think it's going to be like? And if you go to that website, I know you can't click on it, so I just made a little short one. So yelkey.com/national, there's a list of like some of the top critics and what they predict it's going to look like. So you can grab some inspiration from there. But what do you think art's going to look like in the future? Oh, that's cool. Yeah, more advancing, more digital. Even artists who paint now in like acrylics or oils use digital work to sketch it out. I like the idea that Alejandra brought up of how social media makes for platforms and for sharing and for making things more available, can use it as mini galleries, more interactive art. I hope so. That would be awesome. Oh, really? That's cool. Good for her. That's how people get seen. So going into the next unit, just to preview it, you're going to start to read about the Impressionists. And before then, the way that people got their art shown was if the national galleries liked them and would exhibit them. Or if you had like a private investor, like the Medicis out there promoting you. But for people whose art wasn't accepted by those, it was really hard to get seen. There weren't private galleries and there weren't private showings. And that kind of changes in the 1900s. But I think now, yeah, it's going to change now. We're going to see more and more ways, more and more things. These are some of the images that they predicted from those critics that I put the article up to about what art will look like in the future and how it will change. That technology allows us to do things. Cave paintings were cave paintings because spit and ochre was what was available. You know, if Da Vinci lived in the prehistoric era, he'd done some really good cave paintings, but he lived when he had access to science and to art and to acrylic paints, so things were different. That's it for this, but before we go, because I know we've got a couple of minutes still, I wanted to show you guys what the assignment is, because I added it in, and I just wanted to go over it real quick. So any questions while I get up the different screen about art and technology, nouveau riche, photography? Does that all sound good, make sense, feels good? Okay, cool. Well, let me get this up here, and I'll just show you real quick, because it's a little bit different. I just want to make sure there weren't any questions. So you guys are doing really, really well getting stuff done. Keep an eye on the gradebook, because I think I've got it worked out that it will keep going correctly, but if anything looks off, let me know and I'll fix it. Tyler, thanks for resubmitting that discussion with the link that worked for me. I appreciated it. So here is the assignment. That is not it. Okay, you guys see that now? Nope. It's being difficult. There we go. Okay, so it's Art Nouveau and Gaudi, and it's a slideshow. So you can click on this or click on that and it'll bring it up. And what you need to do is make a copy and then title it, and then you'll share the slideshow back with me for the assignment. So you can't edit this, but you can go to File and make a copy, and then you'll be able to edit the copy you make. So there's a couple of different things for you to do. There's a timeline of Gaudi's life, and you just read through these slides. There's 4 of them, and that'll let you fill in the timeline. And then there's some questions for you to answer based on your reading. Show me that you know where Barcelona, Spain is. And then there's some videos that you can watch and then answer these questions. And if you click right here, the video will just play. There's a couple of those, and then a little matching for you to do. So that's the assignment about Gaudi and Art Nouveau. But again, you just click on slideshow, and then, like it says on the first page, make a copy. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's due tomorrow, February 1st. Any questions about anything else? Assignments? You guys have the Unit E test. Most of us have done it, so make sure you do a good job. You're doing okay? All right, well, that is it for time. So I'm gonna let you guys get to work, but you know, if you have questions, email me, message me anytime, okay? All right, have a good Thursday. Have a good weekend. You guys are awesome. Bye. Thanks. Bye.